Michael Curry, presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, keeps telling us that if it's not about love, it's not about God. This tagline, a hallmark of Bishop Curry's ministry for a very long time, seems too easy. A quip, a clever aphorism that works well in the days of sound bites and reduced attention spans. You've heard it, I've heard it, we've all heard it over and over again. But it keeps coming to my mind. I let it roll around in my head every single day. I repeat it to myself over and over while I'm walking, while I'm driving, or while I'm writing a sermon. After an interaction with someone that has unsettled me, or when I'm frustrated, or when my anger is piqued, I keep asking myself, is it about love? Is my reaction to any given stimulus about love? Or is it about me? About my own ego, my own self-centeredness, my own desires, or about my own insecurities? The writer of 1 John spends a great deal of time talking about God being love. But I encourage you, when you go home, not only today to reread that passage, but just go ahead and read 1 John. It will take you 20 minutes. That's the length of 1 John. It's very short. It's only 5 little chapters. They each fit on a page on your computer screen. It's so easy to read. We spend a lot of time talking about love, like the author of 1 John. We spend a lot of time talking about love in this pulpit. In our writings as clergy, Bishop Curry with his opening lines this morning, that if it's not about love, it's not about God. The writer of John's Gospel, the Gospel that we're reading right now, these oft-quoted words from the 3rd chapter. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that everyone who believes in him may not perish but have eternal life. Remember, if you will, Jesus' answer to the young lawyer when the lawyer asks him what the greatest commandment is. And Jesus replies, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. But there's a second, love your neighbor as yourself. We're surrounded by these messages of love. And of the 6 major world religions, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Judaism, we are the only religion whose central tenet is to love one another. That's pretty amazing if you think about it. Others have instructions to do good, to help others, and to love the deity, God, whatever the deity is called. Christians share those too. We're not exempt. Those absolutely come in the instruction manual. But Christians belong to the only major world faith whose followers are instructed to love one another, as our Messiah did, and that our Messiah commands us to do. Loving our neighbors as ourselves is perhaps Christianity's most distinctive characteristic. No one else has that duty. And no wonder, because it is hard as the dickens to love. It is hard to love one another. It's hard to love ourselves. It's hard to live into what Jesus commands us to do. It's hard, and frankly, it's impossible for me to do it. I always get myself in the way. I always let myself get in the way. It's too risky for me to love fully, because that means I open myself up for being loved fully. And boy, that's scary. And loving fully means that I have to let go of my petty grievances and grudges to which I cling devotedly. Because what would it mean if I stopped nursing the emotions over which I have some control and just let God in? Because none of us can love fully like Jesus asks us to do. And as a gardener, I am fond of the gospel writer's words this morning in John. I am the true vine, Jesus says, and we, every single one of us, you and I, are the branches of the vine. We derive our very life from the vine on which we grow. Jesus, who sustains us when we are unable to sustain ourselves. In fact, we delude ourselves to even imagine that we can sustain ourselves, because it is only on Jesus that we can rely. whether we realize it or not. And sometimes, as in any garden, there are parts of us that need to be trimmed up so that the rest of us can grow fuller and bear the fruit that is love. We all have dying limbs, suckers, dead wood that keeps us back from realizing the fullness of God that God calls us into being. If you're like me, the things that prevent us from loving fully and wholly. Alone, we cannot love as God asks us to love. We can't do it. But when we allow God to tend us, to prune us, to cut away the things that hold us back, then and only then can we begin to love more fully and live more fully. Only when we realize that if it's not about love, it's not about God. Only when we realize that can we redirect the thoughts that we think, the actions that we take, and the responses that we have. Only then can the world around us see Jesus in our lives and recognize that we are, in fact, Christians. The only group of people whose charge is to love one another. My prayer this week is that each of us would rehearse hour after hour Bishop Curry's line and ask ourselves what we're doing. Are we doing it out of love, or is there some other motivation? And if it's not about love, then why are we doing it? Repeat these words as if a mantra throughout the day. If it's not about love, it's not about God. Repeat them as you come out of yoga class or in yoga class, as you drive on I-95, especially as you drive on I-95, or in the difficult phone call that you have to make later today or later in the week. Repeat those words over and over and over again and see how it informs your life this week. Make a practice of it. Make a habit of it. If it's not about love, it's not about God. See what happens when we take Jesus' words to heart to love one another. When we abide in the faith that is Jesus, that strengthens us and sustains us, whose model is love and love alone. Because if it's not about love, it's not about God.